The rain wasn't just falling. It was punishing the earth like it had a grudge. Wind howled between narrow buildings, and cold drops stabbed like needles against bare skin. Dylan's shoes were soaked, his jeans clung to his legs, and every passing second on that cracked city sidewalk screamed one thing: run. But just as he stepped off the curb, his hand froze on the strap of his worn-out bag. There was a woman, mid-30s maybe, kneeling by the side of a broken-down car. One hand held up a snapped umbrella, the other tried to fasten a loose tire bolt with fingers that clearly weren't built for it. Her white blouse was soaked through, stuck to her skin, her hair tangled with rain and desperation. He glanced at his watch. 9:04 a.m. The interview had started at 9 sharp. He had fought for weeks to get it. One shot, one miracle. His heart hammered against his ribs like a warning. Walk away, he muttered to himself. You walk away, Dylan. You don't owe her anything. But her hand slipped. She cried out, more from frustration than pain, and then looked up, straight into his eyes. She didn't say a word. Didn't need to. He jogged over before his brain could veto his heart. I've got this, he said, squatting down beside the car. You got a jack? Her voice was small. It broke. Of course it did. Without waiting, Dylan shoved his bag under the car to wedge it. He got on his back and used the lever she had to lift it slowly, inch by inch, soaking his only dress shirt in mud and oil. Why are you helping me? She asked softly. I don't know, he whispered. Maybe someone helped my mom once. She blinked like she hadn't expected that answer. When he finally tightened the last bolt, the time was 9:27. He wiped his hands on his jeans, offered her a nod, and sprinted down the street with his soaked resume slapping against his chest under his coat. He arrived at the office building dripping wet, chest heaving, heart pounding. The receptionist glanced up, looked him over like he was trash someone dragged in, and said, The meeting's already started. You're late. I know. Please. I just need one shot, he panted. The elevator dinged. It felt like Judgment Day. He walked into the top floor boardroom, ready to plead, ready to explain, ready to beg. And then he stopped, because sitting at the head of the long table, dry, clean, powerful, and glowing with quiet authority, was the woman he'd helped. Her hair was still damp, but she wore a sharp black suit now. No broken umbrella. No helplessness. Just power. The whole room turned to her. She stood slowly, her eyes locked on his. Gentlemen, she said to the others, this is Dylan Carter. He's not late. He was doing something more important than showing up on time. He was being decent, and that's exactly what this company needs. Someone in the back whispered, That's the CEO? Dylan stood frozen, and she smiled, just enough. Let's begin, she said. The room buzzed with whispers, but Dylan didn't hear them. He only heard the voice in his head that used to scream, You'll never be enough, go completely silent. For the first time in years, he took a breath, then stepped forward. Dylan couldn't feel his fingers. Whether it was the cold soaked into his skin or the shock of the moment gripping his nerves, he wasn't sure. But as the woman, the CEO, motioned for him to sit, he moved like he was under a spell. The other candidates sat upright in polished suits, with crisp resumes and faces rehearsed in front of mirrors. He looked like he had climbed out a storm drain, which technically wasn't far off. The seat beside the CEO was open. She gestured to it. He hesitated. He began. Sit, she said gently, but with that same steel behind her words. He did. The others shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. Another frowned and muttered something under his breath. The CEO didn't flinch. Before we go over your presentations, she said, addressing the room, I'd like to remind you what this company values. Intelligence, of course. Strategy, sure. But integrity, real integrity, is what we build on. We don't hire resumes here. We hire people. Her eyes didn't leave Dylan's. And Dylan? He didn't know who I was. He had everything to lose. But he stopped anyway. The tension in the room could have cracked glass. One of the candidates scoffed. So we're being judged by our raincoat heroics now. The CEO slowly turned her head. No, but if you're the type of man who'd leave someone stranded just to impress a boardroom, you're not the kind I want in mine. Silence. Dylan could feel a war starting in his chest. Shame, gratitude, disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The meeting rolled on. He watched the others present. He couldn't lie. Some of them were brilliant. Charts, financial projections, perfect diction. And here he was with wrinkled pants and grease on his hands. When it was finally his turn, he stood. Honestly, he said, looking around the room, I didn't bring slides. I didn't expect to be here at all. One of the board members rolled their eyes. Dylan continued anyway. I grew up with a single mom who worked 2 jobs. I watched her fix broken furniture with tape and broken hearts with hugs. I never had the best, but I always try to be decent. I don't know if that counts in a company like this, but if it does, then maybe I'm in the right room. He sat back down. There was a long pause, then a nod from her. Later that day, when the boardroom had emptied and the sun began piercing through the heavy clouds, the CEO found him alone by the elevator. I didn't get the job, did I? He asked, trying to smile through the sinking disappointment. She tilted her head. Why do you think that? I'm not polished. I'm not corporate. I'm not fake, she finished. He blinked. I was once like you, she said quietly. Struggling. Honest. Broke. One night, I missed an opportunity to help a woman because I was in a rush to impress someone in a suit. I've never forgiven myself for it. Today, maybe I got a little of that moment back. Dylan didn't know what to say. She stepped into the elevator and turned to face him. You're hired, but not for the position you interviewed for. His brows pulled together. You're going to shadow me. Directly. The doors began to close. And she smiled. Let's see if you're ready to build something bigger than a title. The elevator disappeared behind steel. Dylan stood alone, speechless, but not broken anymore, because finally, someone had seen him. Not the paper, not the clothes. Him. By the end of the week, Dylan wasn't sure if he was waking up in a dream or a tornado. He had never worn a real tailored shirt before. The company gave him a modest advance to get what he needed. He bought a secondhand blazer, shined up his old boots, and showed up every morning 20 minutes early, just in case. But no matter how early he arrived, she was always there before him. Sabrina Hartwell, CEO, the same woman he helped on the sidewalk. She didn't walk like she owned the company. She walked like she built it. The first few days, people stared. Not because Dylan was new, but because he was different. He didn't talk like them, didn't eat like them, didn't move like them. When Sabrina called him my apprentice, some of the executives nearly choked on their egos. You're telling me the CEO's shadow is a guy who looks like he just got off a construction shift? One manager whispered. Dylan heard it, and Sabrina heard everything. But she said nothing. Until Friday. They were in a meeting with upper management. A product strategy discussion. Dylan was taking notes, trying not to look too eager. He leaned over and quietly suggested a tweak, something small but smart. One of the directors, a silver-haired man with a voice like gravel, smirked. You're not here to contribute, he said, not even looking at him. You're here to observe. Sabrina froze, then slowly closed her laptop. Her voice was calm, but sharp enough to draw blood. I don't recall saying Dylan wasn't allowed to speak. The room went still. The director shifted. With all due respect. No, she cut in. With all due consideration. You think I brought him here as a project? You think this is charity? She stood, her tone even colder now. Dylan Carter is not here because of pity. He's here because he has a better instinct for people than most of you have for numbers. He knows what it means to be overlooked, to fight quietly, to lose with dignity and still show up the next morning. That's the kind of leadership I want more of around here. Her eyes moved to Dylan. Keep talking. Dylan looked down, his jaw clenched against a tide of emotion he hadn't expected. Not because of her defense, but because of the weight of it. No one had ever stood up for him in a room full of power. Not like that. Not even close. After the meeting, she handed him a plain folder. Weekend reading, she said. Nothing heavy. Just our executive blueprint, financial outlook, and merger roadmap. He chuckled nervously. This is nothing heavy. She tilted her head. You're not going to drown, Dylan. But I'll push you till you think you are. That's how we grow. He nodded slowly. Why me? Her gaze softened. Because when I was nobody, someone once chose me too. Then she turned and walked away. That night, Dylan stayed at the office late, reading every line in the folder. He didn't understand all of it, but he tried. Because this wasn't just a job anymore. This was a mirror of everything he'd ever hoped for, and never thought he'd have. And now it was his move. By the second month, Dylan had a rhythm. Early mornings, rapid learning, and quiet evenings filled with notes, books, and unanswered questions. He didn't just want to perform. He wanted to earn his place. But not everyone was rooting for him. There was one executive in particular, Reed Langston, head of corporate strategy. Polished, brilliant, ruthless. The kind of man who only smiled when he was cornering someone. And Dylan? Dylan was a threat Reed hadn't calculated for. You think she picked you because you're smart? Reed whispered one day in the elevator, just the two of them. She picked you to prove a point. And once she's made it, you'll be yesterday's token. Dylan didn't reply. He didn't need to. Reed's words echoed loud enough in his own insecurities. Still, he kept showing up. Until one morning, Sabrina tossed a thick file on Dylan's desk. I'm heading to New York for 3 days. I need you to take point on the Greenbridge proposal. It's confidential. No one else gets access but you and HR. Dylan blinked. You want me to lead the pitch? In front of the board? Yes. I've already briefed them. But, Reed, we'll be watching. Which is exactly why I want you standing, not him. She looked at him with steady eyes. Trust me. He nodded. Barely. What followed was the hardest week of his life. He worked late, slept less, studied past midnight, and practiced his speech in the bathroom mirror. There was so much riding on this. His place, her faith, his self-worth. But the night before the presentation, something went wrong. Very wrong. When he arrived home and opened his bag, the files were gone. All of them. Every document. Vanished. He tore apart his apartment. Called the office. Nothing. Checked the CCTV outside his place. Nothing suspicious. His hands shook as panic clawed up his throat. Then his phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. Should have known they'd never let you belong. Check tomorrow's board packet. He didn't sleep that night. When he arrived the next morning, hard in his throat, he found exactly what he feared. Reed was already presenting the Greenbridge proposal, with Dylan's ideas. Word for word. Charts. Structure. Even the phrase growth with grounded vision. Dylan stood frozen near the door, humiliated, blindsided, and numb. The board applauded. Sabrina wasn't back yet. He turned to leave, quietly. His pride shattered. But just as he reached the elevator, a hand grabbed his arm. It was Naomi, Sabrina's assistant. There's a problem, she whispered. Come with me. Now. They rushed into Sabrina's private office. On her desk was a tablet, paused on a frame of building surveillance. Naomi hit play. There it was Reed, the night before, swiping Dylan's file from his desk when no one was looking. Dylan staggered back. Naomi met his eyes. She installed cameras in all sensitive zones after a previous breach. She trusted you would never break that line. But he already presented. Naomi's voice sharpened, and Sabrina just landed. You've got 5 minutes to fix this. Dylan ran. The boardroom doors swung open, halting Reed mid-sentence. All heads turned as Dylan walked in, breathless. Reed's smirk faltered. Sabrina entered seconds later, calm and composed. Everyone, pause. She handed her tablet to the chairman, who played the clip. Gasps echoed. Reed went pale. Sabrina looked to Dylan. Do you have a copy of your original work? He nodded. I want you to finish what you started. Reed tried to protest, but her voice dropped an octave. Out. Now. Security moved before he could argue. Dylan stood there, dizzy, sweating, terrified. But he opened his laptop and spoke. He talked about sustainable growth, real leadership, and how companies needed to be built not just on intellect, but on empathy. The board listened, quiet, attentive, leaning in. When he finished, the room burst into applause. But the only person he looked at was her. Sabrina gave him a small nod, not just of approval, of belief. That night, Dylan walked out into the city streets. Rain falling again, softer this time. He didn't need shelter. He had found his strength, and it felt like home. A week after the boardroom showdown, Dylan sat across from Sabrina in her private office. Not as her assistant, not as her shadow, but as something else entirely. An equal in the making. She pushed a clean black folder toward him across her desk. Her eyes were tired, but proud. This is your offer letter. Executive Associate Director. With your own small team to lead. Dylan didn't move. His fingers hovered over the folder, but his mind was spinning. You okay? She asked gently. He nodded slowly. It's just, I don't get it. Get what? This wasn't supposed to happen. People like me, guys who fix tires on the street, who can't afford lunch some days, don't get a seat at this table. Sabrina leaned back in her chair and exhaled. You want to know something I've never told anyone here? He glanced up. I wasn't supposed to be here either, she said, voice lower now. I was 23, working 2 jobs. One night, I missed an interview to help a man who passed out on the subway stairs. Lost the job, lost my savings. But 3 months later, that same man turned out to be the founder of this company's first VC investor. Dylan stared. She smiled. He never forgot I stopped. Just like I won't forget that you did. Silence passed like a ripple between them. One born not of tension, but of understanding. And Reed? Dylan asked finally. Gone, she said. But there'll be more like him. They always test the gate when someone new walks in. He nodded. Then he frowned. There's something else I need to do first. 3 days later, Dylan stood on a cracked front porch on the south side of the city. The air smelled like fried oil and old laundry detergent. He knocked once. The door opened slowly. A woman in her 60s blinked at him through the screen. Dylan. He hadn't seen his mother in over a year. I got promoted, he said, almost sheepishly. I've got a real job now. Thought you should know. Her eyes shimmered. You always had a real heart. That was enough. She opened the door wider. You hungry? He stepped inside, more grounded than he'd ever felt. That night, back in the office, he walked into the elevator. Sabrina stood inside already, arms crossed, tired eyes blinking at the floor numbers. You look like hell, she teased. He smirked. I went home. She nodded. Good. They stood in silence for a moment before she turned to him. You're going to be better than me someday. He laughed. Not possible. I said the same thing to someone once, she replied. Then she made me CEO. The elevator dinged. The doors opened, and the two of them stepped into a boardroom together, again. But this time, Dylan wasn't the wet, panicked kid with the broken resume. He was a man who had missed the world's most important interview to help a stranger, and had walked into a future he never saw coming. Because sometimes, your worst detour is just the real path finally showing itself. And if you're lucky, someone's already holding the door open on the other side.